The galaxy was watching, its breath held in anticipation, as Earth's envoy arrived at the Grand Council of the Stars. After centuries of war, strife, and chaos, humanity had finally arrived with an offer no one expected, a proposal for peace. But peace, as it often does, had its price, and in the silent void of space, a new conflict was about to begin. As the delegation from Earth descended into the massive chamber of the Galactic Council, the weight of history pressed down on them. The chamber, a vast expanse of polished obsidian and shifting holograms, was filled with representatives from the most powerful races in the galaxy. Their eyes, varied in color and shape, some reptilian, others insectoid, were fixed on the humans. The leader of the Earth envoy, Ambassador Evelyn Marks, stood at the forefront. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the room, taking in every detail. Her hands were steady as they rested behind her back, betraying none of the tension running through her. For all her composure, Evelyn felt the enormity of this moment, humanity's first chance to join the galactic community on equal footing. She was here to change the course of history, to offer a peace that would reverberate across the stars. Beside her, General Samuel Voss, Earth's military strategist and former war hero, shifted uncomfortably. His jaw was tight, his posture rigid, and his eyes betrayed a simmering impatience. "This is a mistake, Evelyn," he had muttered earlier just before they entered the chamber. "They'll never accept it. Not without a fight." Evelyn had simply nodded, her face unreadable. She had her doubts too, but this was humanity's moment. They had offered war before. Now they were offering something different, something no one had expected. The proposal wasn't just a plea for peace. It was a challenge. A challenge to the galaxy's long-held assumptions about Earth and its people. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," a voice rang out from the far end of the chamber. It belonged to Zerthok, a towering figure from the Kex'thor race, known for their vast intelligence and cold, calculating logic. His 6 eyes glinted in the dim light as he studied the humans. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "We come in peace. We offer an end to the bloodshed, an end to the wars that have ravaged our worlds and your territories alike. We seek to build a future together, to share knowledge, to trade, and to stand united against the challenges the galaxy faces." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, it seemed as if even the stars themselves held their breath. But it didn't last long. The first voice to speak was from the Krolak, a race of towering, muscular creatures whose homeworld was known for its aggressive expansionism. "Peace," the Krolak representative growled, his deep voice reverberating through the room. "Do you expect us to believe that? After everything your kind has done to us?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I understand your skepticism," she said, her tone soft but firm. "But we are offering something new. We are offering a chance for all races to prosper without the need for endless conflict. A chance to build a future where violence is no longer the currency of power." Another voice broke in, this one from the Zane, an alien species known for its telepathic abilities and diplomatic finesse. "And what does Earth gain from this? What's the real cost of this peace you speak of?" Evelyn hesitated for only a moment. "We gain the same as you. The opportunity to evolve beyond our history of war. The chance to ensure the survival of our people, and perhaps even the entire galaxy." The council shifted, murmurs rippling through the room. The tension was palpable, thick as the dark void beyond the walls. Evelyn could sense the doubt, the suspicion swirling around her, but she stood tall. She had presented her case, and now the galaxy had to decide if humanity would be allowed to join them in peace, or if Earth would be cast aside once again. And then Zerthok's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "Your proposal is intriguing," he said, his tone betraying nothing. "But it is not enough. Peace can only exist when trust has been earned, not simply offered." Evelyn's heart sank, but she didn't let it show. She had expected resistance, But the Council's response wasn't what she had anticipated. They may have rejected us, she thought, a chill running down her spine. But we are far from finished. The meeting had ended, but the weight of the decision still hung in the air. The silence that followed the rejection of Earth's peace proposal was deafening, a warning sign that the galaxy's view of humanity had not changed. The chamber was now empty, save for the scattered representatives from various races who had already begun to depart. Evelyn Marks lingered, staring at the hollow space where the council had once gathered. She stood motionless, the soft hum of the room's artificial atmosphere buzzing in her ears. Behind her, General Samuel Voss's footsteps echoed ominously, a reminder of the storm that was about to break. "Well, that went about as expected," Samuel's voice cut through the stillness. "They've rejected us, no surprise there. They'll never trust us." Evelyn turned, her gaze meeting his. "You're wrong, Samuel. We just need more time. They're not rejecting us, they're rejecting change. They're afraid of what humanity could become." Samuel scoffed, crossing his arms. "Afraid, huh? I think they just don't want us in their playground. They've fought wars for centuries, and now they see a species that's done with that kind of life. They're not about to let us come in and mess up their status quo." Evelyn's expression hardened. "We're offering something they've never considered before. Peace, cooperation, unity. That's a threat to their power, Samuel. But we'll prove them wrong. Earth's strength isn't in war anymore. It's in what we can build together." Despite her confidence, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She had known that the Council might resist, but she hadn't anticipated the coldness of their response. Peace wasn't just a proposal, it was a challenge. And right now it seemed that the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Back on Earth, the news of the Council's rejection spread like wildfire. Across the colonies, the reactions were immediate and varied. Some rallied behind the government's promise to keep pushing for peace, while others saw it as a sign of weakness, a signal that humanity had failed to live up to the harsh realities of intergalactic politics. In the core of Earth's government, tensions were already beginning to bubble to the surface. The pacifist faction, led by President Naomi Jung, continued to advocate for diplomacy, hoping that the galaxy would eventually see the wisdom in unity. But not everyone agreed with this course. Admiral Victor Hall, the head of Earth's military forces, was not one for peace talks. He had seen too many of his men and women die on distant battlefields to believe in the power of words alone. Hall's stance was clear. If the galaxy wanted to reject Earth, then it was time to show them what Earth was capable of. "You can't talk your way into peace with the likes of them," Hall argued during a closed-door meeting with the Council of Earth's Defense. "We've tried that. Now, we act." President Jung frowned, but listened. She had been preparing for this day. The Council's rejection had been inevitable, yet she had hoped for a more open-minded approach. "We must remain committed to our goal. One rejection isn't the end." "I disagree," Hall shot back. "You can't walk into a den of wolves and ask them to be friends. We need to send a message, show them that we're not weak, that we won't be ignored." Meanwhile, on the fringes of human space, tensions were rising among the colonies. News of the rejection had ignited fear and anger, especially among the military factions who had long believed that Earth's softness had put them at a disadvantage. The first signs of rebellion came from a colony on the Outer Rim. It was a sparsely populated world, but the political unrest was palpable. A group of radical separatists, led by a former general, took control of the colony's capital, calling for Earth to abandon its diplomatic efforts and embrace its true nature, war. "It's not enough to ask for peace. We must show them that we deserve respect," the rebel leader broadcasted to the colony, his voice a chilling declaration of intent. "Let's give the galaxy something to fear." Back on Earth, the government's security apparatus moved quickly to stifle the growing unrest, but the damage had already been done. The separatist movement was a signal that not all of humanity was willing to play nice. As the days passed, more incidents of sabotage began cropping up across human-controlled space. Ships were attacked, communication lines were severed, and entire colonies were cut off from Earth's oversight. The galaxy, it seemed, was beginning to react to humanity's call for peace in ways they hadn't expected. But not all of it was the result of external forces. Some of it came from within. Evelyn Marks stared out the window of her quarters, the cold, distant stars blinking back at her. She had offered peace, and the galaxy had rejected it. But Earth wasn't giving up. Not yet. However, as she stood there, a sense of foreboding settled deep in her gut. The battle for peace was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The rejection had been swift, but the consequences of that decision were far from over. It had only taken days for the first signs of violent backlash to emerge, and within weeks, the galaxy began to see the true weight of Earth's resolve, or its desperation. The peace that had been offered was now buried under a growing tide of anger and fear, and humanity was quickly running out of options. Ambassador Evelyn Marks sat at the head of an emergency briefing in the Secure Command Center beneath Earth's capital. The room was dimly lit, filled with the hum of digital screens and the tense silence of those who had gathered there. Across from her sat General Samuel Voss, arms crossed, his face etched with concern. Next to him, Admiral Victor Hall was still, but the tension in his eyes was unmistakable. They were all aware that Earth was on the edge of something irreversible. "We can't keep pretending this isn't going to escalate," Hall said, his voice low but sharp. "Every move they've made, every act of sabotage, is just a warning. We've been patient, but I can't guarantee that patience will hold much longer." Evelyn glanced at the data scrolling across the screen before her. Messages from the colonies, reports of insurgencies, rebel factions, and outright violence. The very colonies that had been the heart of Earth's peaceful mission were now falling apart under the pressure of rising dissent. "They're testing us," General Voss muttered, "trying to see how far we'll bend before we break. These are not isolated incidents anymore. This is organized." Evelyn pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to ward off the headache that was beginning to form. "We need to remain calm. We're not going to win anything with violence. I still believe there's a way forward with diplomacy." "You're dreaming," Hall cut in. "We can't talk our way out of this, Evelyn. They've made it clear. Peace isn't on the table. What we're dealing with is war." A grim silence filled the room. Evelyn's mind raced. The prospect of abandoning the peace she had fought for was something she had never truly considered. But Hall's words had a bitter ring of truth. The galaxy had been rejecting Earth's every effort, and now it wasn't just the Council that stood in their way. It was the very fabric of humanity itself, beginning to tear apart. But as much as she wanted to believe in the possibility of peace, the cold reality of the situation couldn't be ignored. The Council had made it clear that Earth was not welcome. In their eyes, humanity was still just a chaotic, war-torn species, unworthy of trust. The diplomatic mission had failed. Peace had been rejected, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with the consequences. On Earth's outer colonies, the consequences were already unfolding. One colony, barely holding onto its fragile sense of unity, declared its independence, breaking all communication with Earth. The once hopeful symbol of cooperation now stood as a fractured, lawless entity, one that had joined the growing wave of rebellion. The separatists, emboldened by Earth's failures, had begun to spread across other colonies. It wasn't just political, it was personal. The rebels didn't see themselves as the outliers. They believed they were the true face of humanity, rejecting what they saw as Earth's weakness and calling for the restoration of the old ways, the warrior spirit of their ancestors. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," said Marcus Rowe, the leader of one of the most dangerous rebel factions. "We're fighting for respect. And if the galaxy wants to treat us like outcasts, we'll show them exactly what we're capable of." Meanwhile, in the capital, President Naomi Jung convened an emergency session of Earth's leaders. trying to navigate the treacherous waters between diplomacy and military action. The growing unrest from the colonies was impossible to ignore, but a full-scale military response could ignite a war that would consume everything. We need to understand that every action we take now will set the tone for everything that comes after, President Jung said, her voice tight with restraint. One wrong move, and we lose more than just our credibility. We could lose Earth itself. But in the back of the room, Admiral Hall stood and cleared his throat. Madam President, with all due respect, we've already lost credibility. There's no going back. The galaxy doesn't fear us, and the separatists within our own ranks are proof that we no longer have control. The arguments raged on. Evelyn sat quietly, her thoughts heavy with the weight of the decision before them. She could see it now, the fracture lines between the factions on Earth, between the colonies, and even within their own government. Each side was pulling in a different direction, and as the debates continued, it became clear that the galaxy was beginning to see humanity not as a potential partner, but as a threat to be contained. Back at the Council, the voices that had rejected Earth's offer of peace were now preparing for their next move. They had all seen the signs. Earth was no longer the peaceful, fledgling species they had once viewed with cautious curiosity. No, humanity had shown a different face, one that no longer wanted to be dismissed. Evelyn stood, watching the flickering holograms that represented the ongoing debate, her mind filled with the image of a galaxy on the brink of war. A war that Earth had started by offering peace. The first strike was swift. It came without warning, a sudden, brutal reminder that Earth's patience had worn thin. The rebel factions on the outer colonies had overplayed their hand, and the galactic powers that had once scoffed at Earth's offer of peace would soon learn the cost of underestimating humanity. In the depths of Earth's War Command Center, the tone of the room had shifted dramatically. The once somber meetings now buzzed with activity as military leaders, analysts, and strategists prepared for the oncoming storm. Ambassador Evelyn Marks stood at the edge of the war room, her face pale and strained, watching as the military took the reins of what had once been a diplomatic effort. General Samuel Voss paced back and forth, his boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by a visible urgency. "The military needs to be prepared for all eventualities," he said, voice low and urgent. "The colonies have made their move, and the galaxy is about to realize we won't back down." Evelyn swallowed hard. She had spent years advocating for peace, and now all those years of diplomacy, of building trust, were on the brink of collapse. Yet, as the tides of war surged closer, she could no longer deny the reality. Earth had no other choice but to strike back. A voice crackled through the intercom system, breaking the silence. "General Voss, we've received reports of mass mobilization from the separatists. They've already seized control of the Terran Rim. Ships are preparing for a full-scale assault." Voss's face hardened. "Deploy the fleet immediately. Target key installations, and take control of their communications. We need to cripple their ability to coordinate." Evelyn's mind raced. She had known that Earth's military capabilities were formidable, but seeing them in action, in this context, felt like a line that could never be uncrossed. As a diplomat, she had once believed in the power of words of reason. But the galaxy had rejected her offer, and now Earth was answering with fire. The first battle took place in the dead of night, over a forgotten moon in the outer reaches of human space. It was a location of little strategic value until now. The rebels had believed that by taking it, they could send a message to Earth that they were no longer willing to be controlled. What they didn't anticipate was the speed and ferocity with which Earth would respond. From the shadows of the moon's orbit, Earth's military unleashed its fury. In a matter of hours, the rebel forces were routed, their fleet scattered and crushed under the weight of Earth's advanced weaponry. The rebels had fought with passion, but they were no match for the precision and power that Earth's military now commanded. General Voss watched the battle unfold on his screen, his face a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. "This is just the beginning," he muttered under his breath. Back in the capital, President Naomi Jung sat in her private office, a cold sweat forming on her brow as she watched the reports flood in. She had feared this day would come, but the reality of seeing her people embroiled in war was more painful than she had imagined. "We had a chance at peace," she whispered to herself. "Now it's slipping through our fingers." Despite her personal anguish, she knew what had to be done. Earth could not afford to show weakness, not now, not after everything they had fought for. The Separatists had drawn first blood, and the galaxy would soon learn that humanity was no longer the prey. They were the hunters. In the aftermath of the first major victory, Earth's military was emboldened. The power of their fleets and the devastating effectiveness of their new technologies were on full display. What had begun as a defensive campaign soon escalated into a full-scale offensive. Humanity's forces no longer simply defended their colonies. They took the fight to their enemies. Within days, Earth's military had recaptured several key colonies from the Separatists, restoring control to Earth's government. But that was only the beginning. News of humanity's newfound strength spread like wildfire, reaching the galactic powers who had once dismissed Earth as a naive and primitive race. Evelyn, caught in the midst of it all, found herself facing an unbearable truth. The peace she had spent her life advocating for was slipping further from reach. Every battle fought, every colony reclaimed, was another nail in the coffin of diplomacy. The human spirit, once hopeful, eager for cooperation, had become a force of vengeance. And yet, as she watched the devastation unfold, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of betrayal. This wasn't the path she had wanted. This wasn't the future she had dreamed of. But with each passing day, it seemed as if Earth had no choice but to embrace the fury that had been stirred within them. "We've crossed the line," Evelyn said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. "There's no going back now." The galaxy had rejected humanity's peace. Now, they would face the full force of Earth's wrath. The galaxy had always underestimated humanity. For years, Earth had been seen as a mere footnote in the greater galactic history, a young, impulsive species, prone to mistakes, driven by emotions, and untested on the scale of interstellar power. But now, as the fires of war spread across the stars, humanity's response was undeniable. Earth had made its choice. Peace was no longer on the table. The message had been sent. If the galaxy wanted war, it would get war. Back on Earth, the toll of this new era was taking its hold. The capital had become a tense battleground of ideas, where factions within the government pushed for different courses of action. At the forefront was President Naomi Jung, whose belief in peace had not been shaken, though her options were quickly dwindling. The peacekeeping initiatives she had worked so tirelessly for were now buried under the weight of growing military demands. It was a delicate balance. Earth's military might had been tested and proven, but each victory came with its own costs. The population, once unified by the hope of a peaceful future, was now divided. Those who had supported Earth's peace initiative felt betrayed by the government's aggressive stance. Protesters filled the streets of major cities, calling for an end to the violence, while others rallied around the military's flag, demanding retaliation against those who had dared to oppose humanity's offer. Evelyn Marks had become a reluctant symbol of this shift. As the ambassador who had once believed in the potential for galactic unity, she now found herself walking a razor's edge. She couldn't deny the changes within herself, nor the cold resolve that had begun to form. The galaxy had chosen its path, and humanity had responded in kind. She had always believed in the power of words, but now her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The time for diplomacy had passed. In the command center, General Samuel Voss had begun to take a more active role in Earth's military strategy. Though he had long been a supporter of peace, his pragmatism had led him to accept that the galaxy would not bend to Earth's idealism. The sudden, unrelenting pressure had forged a new Voss, one who saw the cold necessity of war, even when it meant losing everything they had once stood for. "We can't stop now," Voss said, his voice as steady as the tactical reports in front of him. "Every day we delay, we risk giving the separatists time to regroup, and we can't afford that. We need to send a message, fast." Evelyn stood in the shadow of his decision, torn between her duty and her conscience. What had begun as a diplomatic mission was now a fight for survival. There was no going back. Earth was no longer a naive species. It was becoming a galactic powerhouse. And with that came the terrifying realization that power always required sacrifices. The war had spread to new fronts. In the outer colonies, where separatist factions had once flourished under the protection of Earth's declining influence, humanity's military forces began their calculated retakes. Using their newfound technology, Earth's forces struck with surgical precision. Rebel strongholds fell. Their leaders hunted down with brutal efficiency. As Earth reclaimed its colonies, the galaxy's perception of the human race began to change. No longer were they seen as a ragtag species of earthbound hopefuls. The world that had once proposed peace now commanded the stars with the weight of 1,000 battles behind them. Military forces from other galactic powers, once quick to dismiss Earth, were now watching with bated breath. Earth was becoming a force that could no longer be ignored. They weren't just fighting to defend their colonies. They were redefining what it meant to be a galactic power. Evelyn had seen the first signs of this change when she had stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, watching the debris of an enemy fleet float through space. It was a sobering sight, one that sent a chill through her chest. She had once believed that war would only lead to destruction. Yet, the more victories they achieved, the more she understood. The cost of peace was too high for those who refused to listen. And now, Earth had become a predator in the galactic theater, a predator with nothing left to lose. In the vast, silent emptiness of space, the tension was palpable. News of Earth's relentless campaign spread to every corner of the galaxy. Even the most powerful factions, the ones who had dismissed Earth's offer of peace, couldn't ignore what was happening. They watched with growing unease as humanity's grip tightened around their colonies and territories. No one had anticipated this. No one had predicted that Earth, once seen as a fledgling race, would rise to become such a formidable force. Back in the capital, President Zheng received daily reports, each one more grim than the last. The war was growing more intense, and her options were narrowing. She had always believed that peace was a possibility, that through diplomacy, the galaxy could avoid the bloodshed she saw unfolding in front of her. But the galaxy had rejected that belief, and with each passing day, the calls for war grew louder. She met with her advisors in a rare, closed-door session. "We're losing the narrative," she said, her voice taut with frustration. "The message is clear. We are not the peaceful species we thought we were. We are becoming what they feared." Evelyn's thoughts mirrored those of the president. The human race had been forced to adapt quickly, but with each battle, each loss, the bitter reality became clearer. Humanity's spirit was unyielding, but at what cost? The galaxy had shown no mercy, and in turn, Earth's fury had been unleashed. The question now wasn't whether Earth would survive, but what it would become in the aftermath of this war. And somewhere beyond the stars, the galaxy was waiting. The war had stretched on for months, each day more relentless than the last. Humanity, once a fledgling species on the periphery of galactic affairs, had transformed into an unstoppable force. Earth's military had reclaimed colonies, crushed rebellions, and sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Yet, even as their enemies faltered, a deeper question lingered in the shadows of the conflict. What would Earth become once the fighting ceased? Would they emerge as a new, respected power? Or would they be nothing more than the next fallen empire? Their rise only a brief flicker in the cold expanse of space? On Earth's capital, the mood had shifted once again. The initial fervor of military success had begun to wear thin. The citizens who had once rallied behind their leaders now faced the grim realities of a war that showed no signs of stopping. Casualties were mounting. Resources were dwindling. And as much as Earth's forces had achieved, the price they had paid seemed ever higher with each passing day. In the grand halls of government, President Naomi Jung sat before a council of military and diplomatic leaders, her face drawn and weary. The war, though technically a series of victories, had begun to feel like a hollow conquest. They had fought hard to prove humanity's strength, but at what cost? "We reclaimed our colonies," General Voss said, his voice tight with exhaustion. "We've crushed the separatists. But we're running out of time. The rest of the galaxy is watching us. They're waiting for us to falter." Evelyn Marks, standing to the side, could feel the gravity of the moment. She had watched the transformation of humanity with a growing sense of unease. There had been no choice but to fight, but the more she witnessed, the more she feared that the war was becoming an end in itself. Earth's rise to power had been swift, but the longer they fought, the more they risked becoming the very thing they had once despised. "We can't keep going like this," President Jung spoke up, her voice steady but laced with a palpable sense of sorrow. "We're becoming something we didn't want to be. We're losing our soul. The galaxy sees us as conquerors now, not peacekeepers." The room fell silent as her words echoed. No one had the answer. The military had its orders: conquer, secure, dominate. But there was no plan for the aftermath. No vision for what Earth's place in the galaxy would be once the war ended. Outside the meeting room, the streets of Earth's capital were filled with protesters, their chants a desperate plea for an end to the violence. People who had once stood behind the military effort now questioned whether it had been worth it. Their cities had been rebuilt after each attack, only to see them shattered again. Lives lost, not for survival, but for something deeper, something more dangerous. The separatists, though crushed, had left a bitter legacy. Some of their forces had surrendered, but many had simply retreated into the shadows, their cause far from extinguished. They had become martyrs in the eyes of the people, their rebellion a symbol of resistance against what they now saw as an authoritarian Earth. Even after defeat, the seeds of discontent had been planted. Earth's military might had quelled the immediate threat, but had it secured a lasting peace? Or had it simply rewritten the conflict in their own image? Evelyn watched President Jung closely, sensing the weight of her internal battle. The president had always believed in peace, in unity. Now, she was facing a galaxy that demanded a different approach. Humanity's victories were stacking up, but so were the questions about whether Earth had lost its way. "Do you think it's worth it?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jung met her gaze, her eyes tired but unwavering. "I don't know anymore. But we've come too far to turn back. If we stop now, if we try to go back to the way things were, we risk everything we've gained. We risk losing humanity itself." But as the president spoke, Evelyn felt a gnawing sense of dread. What had humanity gained, truly? They had proven themselves strong, but at the cost of their soul. They had secured a future, but that future was built on war, not peace. In the far reaches of space, the galaxy had begun to look upon Earth with a mix of fear and awe. Where once they had dismissed humanity as insignificant, now they saw a rising power, a power that could either restore order to the galaxy or plunge it into an age of conquest. The decision would lie in the hands of Earth's leaders, but the question remained: would Earth choose to build, to unite, or would it fall into the darkness of unchecked ambition? As the war raged on, one thing became certain: Earth had crossed a line. There was no going back. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. And in the end, the only question left was whether Earth could live with the consequences of its newfound power.